Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of Senator Rubio's comments, I'd just like to note of caution. He listed refugee flows, human rights abuses, and corruption. There are lots of countries in the world that meet that description, and our right or responsibility to generate regime change in a situation like that, I think, is a slippery slope. And I have some real caution about what our vital interests are and whether it's our right or responsibility to take action to try to change the government of another sovereign country. That same description would have led us into a much more active involvement in Syria, for example, 5 or 6 years ago, other parts of the country. I just wanted to note that. Senator Burr, I loved your opening statement. It was very thoughtful, and you came up with a wonderful formulation for, I think, a mission of this committee and also the Intelligence Community of creative, adaptive, and resolute. And I must say it reminded me immediately of my old high school football coach who put it somewhat less elegantly. He said he wanted us to be agile, mobile, and hostile. I think that may be a less elegant way to put it, but the same principle. On Huawei, it seems to me they have to decide they're either going to be a worldwide telecommunications company or an agent of the Chinese government. They can't be both. And right now, they're trying to be both. And I think the world's customers, which the Chinese are certainly sensitive to, are the best enforcers of that principle. Director Haspel, one quick, I think, a yes or no question. And I think I almost said Senator Coates. Director Coates referred to this in his opening testimony. Is Iran currently abiding by the terms of the JCPOA in terms of their nuclear activities?
Senator King, I think the most recent information is the Iranians are considering taking steps that would lessen their adherence to JCPOA as they seek to pressure the Europeans to come through with the investment and trade benefits that Iran hoped to gain from the deal.
But since our departure from the deal, they have abided by the terms. You're saying they're considering, but at the current moment, they're
yes, they're making some preparations that would increase their ability to take a step back if they make that decision. So at the moment, technically, they're in compliance, but we do see them debating amongst themselves as they fail to realize the economic benefits they hope for from the deal.
Thank you. Director Haspel and General Ashley, Mr. Khalilzad, our envoy to Afghanistan, has said that part of the basis of the current talks with the Taliban is that they would prevent Afghanistan from ever becoming a platform for international terrorist groups. And of course, that was the basis of our original intervention. Do we believe them, and are they capable of that? Did they learn something from having given safe haven to Osama bin Laden? Do we believe that there's a mindset change that could be a enforceable or at least a reasonable expectation? Director Haspel.
Yes, Senator, and you're referring to very recent and fresh news that has come out of Ambassador Khalilzad's very intensive efforts over many months now, but particularly over the last 8 days in Doha, where he has been engaged in talks with the Taliban to seek to achieve a framework under which we could conduct.
Can we believe that the Taliban will do that?
Well, because we have inflicted severe damage on al-Qaeda in the AFPAC theater, I think, however, that all of us at this table would agree that it's very important that we maintain pressure on the terrorist groups that are there. And so if there were an eventual peace agreement, a very robust monitoring regime would be critical, and we would still need to retain the capability to act in our national interest if we needed to.
Thank you. Another note, Director Coates, you mentioned, I wouldn't say almost in passing, but it was just a sentence of your introduction, which I think is a very important point and maybe the big news of right now what's going on, increased cooperation between Russia and China. For a generation, that hasn't been the case. That could turn out to be a very big deal on the horizon in terms of the United States. If those two countries begin to work together systematically, that could be a big problem for us. One more quick question. Director Wray, you're doing a lot of monitoring and working with, working on the intervention in our election process. One thing we're worried about is deep fake, which we've used but not defined. That's when they use technology to create essentially a false reality, an apparent speech by a candidate where different words are coming out of their mouth than what they actually said. Here's my question. If in the next 2 years, and particularly in the year preceding the next election, your agency determines that this is happening and that it's sponsored by a foreign entity, will you inform the candidates that are the victims of this, the committees? My concern is it's one thing for the Intelligence Committee to know that this is happening, but if they don't inform the people who are being victimized, who are being attacked in this way, I think that really blunts the effectiveness of the availability of the intelligence.
Senator, we have a fairly established protocol that we work through to try to determine whether or not we have information that is reliable enough and immediate enough and actionable enough to be able to notify a victim. The Department of Justice has a set of guidelines that goes through that. They've recently been expanded to provide us more flexibility in the foreign influence or malign influence arena, which this would be a permutation of, and we would expect to follow that process.
I hope you'll review that process, because telling the world of a malign influence a month after the election doesn't do anybody any good. So I hope that could be reviewed and thought about in terms of letting people know as soon as possible when there's a credible evidence of a foreign deep fake or other kind of cyber attack on a campaign.
Just to be clear, I wasn't referring to the sort of post-election process.
No, I understand.
The protocol that I'm talking about is that's where the actionable piece of it comes into play, right? Obviously, the ability to be able to contact, just like we do in the cyber arena,
well,
for example.
I just want to be sure our policies keep pace with the magnitude and accelerated nature of the threat.
Well, we clearly need to be, to your point about agility, we clearly need to be able to adapt as the technology adapts. And as Director Coates said in his opening, we would expect our foreign adversaries in the malign influence space to keep adapting as well, which is a source of concern.
We want you to be agile and mobile, maybe not hostile. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, General Ashley has a comment he would like to.
Okay, if I go back to your comment on Huawei, you know, Huawei needing to make a decision about the direction that they want to take with regards to how do they support the Chinese government or as an independent business. The challenge in which you've laid out part of the dialogue is that decision does not lie with Huawei. It lies with the CCP. It lies with Xi Jinping in the way that they are starting to centralize greater the management of those businesses. So therein lies the challenge, where you see a decentralization and execution of capitalism, but really you have this kind of authoritarian capitalism in the way that the government provides oversight and puts very strict rules in place that makes it very problematic for a lot of those businessmen to operate without providing that information back to Beijing.
And I think the market has to tell them that's not acceptable. Thank you.
Agree.